Welcome, everybody, to Moose Milk Podcast, episode 40. Episode 40. Just cruising along here. I'm your host, Ryan, and this week it is a solo episode. I'm by myself. No Matthew. He's on vacation, having a good time at home, and so I'm doing this one solo, and it's weird because I've never done one of these solos, so if this turns out terrible, my own fault. Can't blame anyone but myself. But yeah, hope everybody's doing well. It's, late Friday night, early Saturday, and having some beers. We're on the verge of Halloween and spooky season, so I figured this week we will dive into my top 10 horror film recommendations. And, some spooky movies to watch during spooky season. So that's the plot of this episode. But I will dive into things I've been watching and a little bit of What If, episode, 9? The finale of What If. I don't want to dive too deep. We're going to wait till Matt comes back and we'll do like a spoiler cast / discussion on What If. But overall, I'll say What If was okay. It was better than I expected it to be in the long run. Overall, not great. I don't think it was like the best show out of the 4 shows we've gotten so far from the MCU, but it was better than I expected, not being a fan of animated shows and everything like that. I think it started really poorly, but it was actually kind of what me and Matt predicted. It came together in the end and kind of cohesively. I mean, I don't think the finale was great, but I think it was overall pretty solid. I'm interested to see where it goes. Second season should be interesting, and the effects it may have on the actual MCU as a whole. It was intriguing, but we'll talk about it in 2 weeks when Matt's back and we can get his thoughts on it and we can kind of have a discussion on it. But so what I've been watching, let's see. So last week I talked about Midnight Mass. I always want to call it Black Mass, but Midnight Mass. Really, really solid. So if you haven't watched that during spooky season, it's a good spooky show. I don't want to go into spoilers on it. Overall, I think it was really, really solid, and I highly recommend it. But this week, I dove into Squid Game, which is blowing up the internet. Everybody's talking about Squid Game. I don't know if it was because of the hype or whatever, but I was looking for a new show to binge. Figured I'd hop in on it. It's okay. If you haven't seen it, I don't want to spoil it too much because I think part of the interest and exciting part of the show is not knowing exactly what's happening from the get-go. So I think if you have not seen it or haven't read anything on it, definitely wait and just dive into it on your own and don't read up on it because I think it makes it a much more interesting show. But overall, my thoughts on it was okay. It's not like, the second coming of Jesus, like, the internet is making it out to be. It's becoming like the highest watched show on Netflix in history. I think that's a bit absurd. But I enjoyed it. I think it's a fun watch. It's Korean, so if you don't dig subtitled shows, this isn't for you. It's all subtitled because it's all Korean spoken. So it's English subtitles, but Korean spoken. So I don't know if there's a dub track for it, but either way, I don't mind subtitles. I watch everything subtitled anyway because I usually have a really hard time hearing dialogue and stuff of shows. So I watch everything subtitled. So yeah, it doesn't bother me in the least. But overall, I think it's a fun show. It's interesting. It has some cool moments. I think the first episode is probably the best episode of the series, but overall, I enjoyed it. I'd recommend it if you're looking for something a little different. I don't want to spoil it, so I don't want to give away the plot points of the show, but it's worth a watch if you're looking for something to dive into during, kind of a slow time where there's not a whole lot of TV shows going on, at least in my opinion. Obviously, I'm still watching American Survivor, The Block, and The Challenge. A big reality show fan, so still digging on those shows. American Survivor is a little weird this year. They changed up a lot of things. I mean, 41 seasons in, you got to try some new things. And so far, season's okay. Doesn't blow me away. I like some of the people, like some of the twists they're using for the show, but if you haven't watched Survivor in a while, I think this is a decent season to jump in on just because it's changing a lot of things up. I'm having beers. I'm sorry if I stop talking for a minute, but being solo is weird, man. Not being able to bounce things off of people, very odd. But yeah. So then, other than that, I don't think I've watched anything of value. I'm going to start watching a bunch of horror films, which kind of brings me to the point of this episode. Top 10 horror films. I haven't watched anything yet. I haven't had time. Obviously, for people that are new or haven't tuned in, I work in retail, grocery retail, so Thanksgiving week is actually the busiest week of the year for grocery retail. So this week has been a nightmare. So yeah, I haven't had a lot of time this week. I worked a bunch. I was really tired. So I haven't really spent a lot of time doing anything of value other than sleep and work. Picked up Far Cry 6. I'm going to jump into that tonight after the podcast is done. So I'll have thoughts on that next week. Excited for that. Played a bunch of Diablo last week. Diablo 2, actually, the remake. Solid. If you haven't played Diablo 2, it's very similar to Diablo 3 or any type of like top-down looter RPG. It's good. It feels clunky. It feels very dated at this point. Like, it definitely feels like a game that came out in, I think it was 2000 or 2001. But overall, I enjoy Diablo a lot. It's fun to play with. I've been playing with my friend, and you can play with up to 8 people, I think. So that's cool. But I'm generally a single player kind of dude. I like single player games, so you can play it alone. It's just as good. Yeah. It's Diablo. If you haven't played Diablo, then, I mean, you can read up a little bit on it, but it feels dated at this point. I mean, it's definitely better to play with a mouse than a controller, but I'm enjoying it. And then I'll jump into Far Cry 6 tonight, play a bunch of that. And that's, I think, about it. Nothing really else to jump in on. So I guess we'll get to the main topic of the week. And just a side note, this pod is probably going to be on a shorter side. Doing it solo, probably be like 30 minutes, 40 minutes. Like, there's not a lot to, bounce off of somebody, obviously, because I'm by myself. So it's going to be like half the normal length of an episode, just because I'm one person. I mean, yeah. So if you don't like horror films, or you are under the age of whatever, 18, I guess, I'm not recommending you watch these movies just because I don't want to get in trouble with, hey, I'm 14 and watch a bunch of R-rated movies and my parents hate you now. So just keep that in mind. But yeah, so I'm just going to jump in. I put down 2 honorable mentions. Obviously, it's hard to do top 10 horror films because, like, what constitutes a horror film and what doesn't. It makes it difficult because some movies are like, let's say Aliens. I don't put that on my list. It's kind of a horror film. It has horror elements. Alien, I would say, is more of a horror film. Aliens is more of an action film. I love Aliens, but I don't really find it scary necessarily. I mean, some of these movies I don't find scary either, but there was a bunch of, like, Cloverfield. Cloverfield's another movie where I guess it's kind of a horror film, but it's more of a action, I don't know, more of an action film, I guess. So I didn't put it on the list. Now, some of these movies, you might go, that's not really that scary of a film or horror film, but I love horror films. It's probably my favorite genre of films, maybe sci-fi, I don't know, it'd be close. But, yeah, so these are the horror films that I thought were most horror films that are my favorite. I put 2 honorable mentions down. The Last House on the Left remake came out in 2009 by director Dennis Iliadis. I'm not familiar with his work outside of this, but I will warn that the beginning of this movie is pretty triggering, I guess, for people that have some sexual assault issues or something like that. I don't want to spoil the movie, but the beginning of this movie is hard to watch, but I think the second half of this movie is definitely very redeeming and worthy of the first half. So it's basically kind of a revenge movie, but I really enjoy it. It's really, really violent, really, really brutal. But I think it's definitely a really cool film. I have only seen the original once, and I don't really remember it that well, so I can't really say whether it's worthy of the original or which one's better. But I love The Last House on the Left remake. It came out in 2009, and it's really solid. Pretty, like I said, pretty brutal. So if you're very squeamish or anything like that, maybe don't recommend it. But if you're looking for a good horror film, I think it's a lot of fun. And I also wrote down Dawn of the Dead remake. Zack Snyder directed it. I think it's Zack Snyder's by far his best movie. And I know that's probably pretty crazy to some people, but it came out in 2004, and obviously a remake of the original Dawn of the Dead, but changes it up at certain points. It's a zombie film. I love zombies. I've always been a huge zombie fan. And yeah, it's just a really fun film. I think it has some pretty brutal scenes. Changes things up enough from the original that makes it a little more exciting. A lot of fun. Just a fun movie. So yeah, really recommend it. And for zombie films, like, you don't really need a great script, and I think that's Zack Snyder's generally worst part of his films is the script is abysmal. So yeah, I think that's why the zombie movie for Zack Snyder works, is because you don't really need a good script. You just need some cool action scenes, and really sets up the movie well. So my number 10, and I know this is going to be probably a surprise to a lot of people, but I put down Jason X. Most people hate Jason X. I think it's probably the lowest rated Jason movie, or Friday the 13th movie in general. I might be wrong on that, but it's probably pretty close. I think it's the funnest Friday the 13th movie. It's absurd. The storyline, the plot, the acting, everything in it is not well done in general. Like, it's not a superb film by any stretch. I think it's a fun film. I think it has some of the best kills of the entire series. I love Kane Hodder as Jason. I think he's the best Jason they've ever had. He's badass as fuck in that movie. It's a dumb movie. Basically, for people that don't know, it's like basically it was set in a future time of, I think it's 2450 or something like that, because they were in development hell on Freddy vs. Jason. So they basically wanted to set it far flung in the future, so it had no effect on the outcome of Freddy vs. Jason or another Friday the 13th movie. It's stupid. The plot's stupid. The storyline's stupid, but it's just a super fun, brutal, slasher movie. I don't know. I love this movie. I think it's such a fun film to watch. And is it like superb? No, but I think anybody that's looking for like a silly, maybe like a group setting, like, got like 4 or 5 friends over and just want a fun film, I think Jason X is a ton of fun. Came out in 2001. Basically the last Jason movie. I mean, they remade it, but it's the last one really that came out other than Freddy vs. Jason. But I think it's a lot of fun. Number 9 is the movie Planetary. And I don't know if necessarily a lot of people would call this a horror film, but I mean, it has horror elements for sure. It's kind of an action film. It was part of the, what do you call it? I can't think of the word. It came out at the same time as another film by Quentin Tarantino. It was like a 2-pack movie. I can't think of what the hell it's called right now, but it was directed by Robert Rodriguez, Planetary, and came out in 2007. And it's like a very throwback, like 70s, 80s horror film. It's filmed that way, where like the screen will like sketch out like it's shot on like actual celluloid, and it's like very ridiculous and silly, but I think it's such a fun film to watch. like I said, really silly. There's parts of it that are like laugh out loud ridiculous, but it's so fun and brutal, and just like, if you want to watch like a fun action film that has like, you know, some pretty gory scenes at parts, I think it's a lot of fun. Yeah, I think that's what I typically go for in horror, is like, can it make me laugh? Is it fun to watch? Is it like so cheesy that it's good, compared to like so cheesy where you're like, oh my god, like I can't believe I'm spending 2 hours or 90 minutes watching this. And there are some movies on my list that I generally find or have found scary, but overall I would find this movie more of a fun film, again, to watch in a group setting, like, you know, either with a girlfriend or, you know, a group of friend or boyfriend, whatever, you know, is for you. But yeah, I really enjoy it. I think it's a good 90-minute flick that you can put on at any time and kind of have it as background noise if you don't want to fully pay attention. But there's some parts in this movie that I just think are like fucking awesome. So I highly recommend that. And then number 8, I got The Devil's Rejects by Rob Zombie. Came out in 2005. And it's obviously a sequel to House of a Thousand Corpses. And the third one came out, what was it called? The Devil's 3 or 3 from Hell. 3 from Hell. I think House of a Thousand Corpses is a lot of fun. I don't think it's great. I think it's solid. Devil's Rejects, I think, is like really, really, really good movie. I think it's Rob Zombie's best movie. I thought the 3 from Hell was a huge letdown. I don't think it was a very solid, I mean, not a solid movie, not a great ending to the franchise. He obviously did the Halloween remake and Halloween 2 remake, which Halloween 2 wasn't really a remake. It was kind of like a reimagining. Halloween 2 was okay. It was kind of stupid, but it was fine. Halloween 1 I actually enjoyed a lot, but compared to the original, like, it's nowhere near as good as the original. His biggest issue, in my opinion, is dialogue. Rob Zombie makes everything like kind of, in no disrespect to people that live in trailers, but like trailer trashy, white trash type dialogue, which like is just really like cheesy and hard to listen to, hard to watch during the film. Especially in Halloween 2, like, it's really bad. But Devil's Rejects, I think, is just like there's parts of this movie I genuinely find scary. It's graphic. It's hard to watch at parts, but it's really fun and really solid. Like I said, Rob Zombie's best film, in my opinion. I wish he would come back to something that I really enjoyed, but I think the next movie he's doing is the Monsters remake, which is just completely unappealing to me. But I love Rob Zombie's music. Like, I'm a unapologetic zombie fan, so yeah, I've always checked out his films, and some of them are very miss, but I think he hit it out of the park a few times. And Devil's Rejects is his best, in my opinion. Number 7 is Paranormal Activity. And I know a lot of people are going to say, Paranormal Activity, like, fuck, that's not a horror film. It scares me, and I've always had a thing with ghosts. I don't believe in ghosts. I don't believe in the paranormal, really. But this movie spooks me out. I've always been spooked out by the idea of ghosts, something you can't see, something you can't really affect or interact with, that can fuck with you. And I think that, like, thought premise is scary. Paranormal Activity scared me. And actually, I mean, this is kind of a side story, but I'm actually in the credits of Paranormal Activity. I don't know if that's still true, but on the Blu-ray, when it came out, for the movie to come out, basically, it was a very low budget film, and theaters weren't picking it up. So online, they did like a thing where you could push the movie to come to theaters near you, basically, if you signed up on a newsletter, and they'd put you in the credits. So yeah, at the end of the movie, in the credits, there's like a scene where it's like 100,000 names that just like pan through very, very quickly, but I'm in there. I was excited for this movie from the get-go. I thought the trailer was really cool when I first seen it, and it made me very intrigued by the film. And yeah, I love Paranormal Activity. The second one scared me more than the first one, actually, but I think the first one's a better overall film. And yeah, I don't know. It's a weird found footage film. It's spooky at parts, but not a lot happens, and I think a lot of people are turned off by that. But overall, I find Paranormal Activity 1 and 2 as the best two films in the series. What's up, Matt? Nice to see you, buddy. Can't be on the show, but can come in the comments. Hey, jerk. No, I'm just joking. I hope your vacation is treating you well, brother. So where am I at? Number 6 is The Descent. I don't know if everybody's seen this movie. This movie might be off some people's radars, I guess, but I really love The Descent. It's kind of Matt says his mom and him are watching. That's awesome. What's up, Matt's mom? Yeah, I'm glad you guys are getting to spend some time together. It's awesome. And you get a nice vacation right before Thanksgiving. Nothing better than that, man. Best week to miss. Yeah, The Descent is like kind of a found footage film, but it's also not really shot in that way where it's like shaky cam and kind of disturbing, but it's very gory. But it's basically the premise of the movie is like four, maybe 5 women go spelunking in like a cave system, basically, and as they get deeper into this cave system, it like kind of collapses behind them, and they get like basically stuck in very narrow passages throughout this cave. And it's like very claustrophobic and shot in a way that makes you like definitely feel like you're there with them. Without spoiling the movie, it gets pretty graphic at times, but I found this movie very spooky. Like, it made me jump a few times when I originally seen it. It's shot. It came out in 2005. There's a sequel that's not as good as the original. It's very similar to the first movie. It's kind of like first movie again, but directed by Neil Marshall. And yeah, I don't know. I think it's a really fun movie that I think a lot of people haven't probably checked out. But The Descent is very, very good. I recommend it highly. I would actually put it higher, but the movies ahead of it, it was just hard to break out of them, because these are probably like 4 or 5 of my favorite films of all time. Like, they maybe make my top 20 or 30 films, period, as a huge horror films fan. So number 5, we're getting to the nitty gritty, is 28 Days Later. And I think I might have put this movie in my top 20 when Matt and I did top 20 back, I don't know, episode 16 or something like that. It's a zombie film again. I love zombie films, but really different take for its time in 2002. It was directed by Danny Boyle. Shot really well. Cillian Murphy's in it. He does a really, really good job as like the leading actor in the movie. Really brutal at times, fast-moving zombies. Shot in a way that like it takes place in England, and it's like really cool, like wide shots of the city and stuff like that. And I love like post-apocalyptic settings within cities and stuff like that. Seeing things overgrown or seeing things abandoned, seeing wide shots of like an entire city, like a main city, completely devoid of people. Like, I find that super fascinating. It's always really interested me. And I just love, a lot of this film takes place in this like wide shots of just like the city abandoned, and like they go into a grocery store and everything's still on the shelf, and certain parts of the city where people try to like held up in apartment buildings and stuff like that, and blocking passages. And I think it's just a really cool film. They did a sequel, which is a really solid film, called 28 Weeks Later. I really enjoyed it. I think it's one of the best sequels to any horror film probably ever made. There's always rumors they're going to do a third one too, and I think the rumor was it was going to be called 28 Months Later, which makes sense. It follows the trend, but don't know whatever happened to it. I think it got caught in development hell, but I really enjoyed it. Both the sequel and the original. I had a hard time picking which one I wanted to put, but I think the original is always the best place to start, so it's the one I could recommend. No worries, Matt. Thanks for dropping by, buddy. I appreciate it. Number 4, I'm going to go with the Blair Witch Project. And This is a movie that I seen probably when I was really young, like 14 or 15. Came out in 1999. Thanks, man. I love the Blair Witch Project. My mom seen it before I seen it and knew that I would find it spooky. And it's a movie that always has spooked me out. I went camping a lot as a kid. And the idea of like something you can't see kind of hunting you in the woods out there by yourself or with friends, like the idea always kind of spooked me out. It was directed by Daniel Myrick and Eduardo Sanchez, which I don't think they really went on to film or direct anything else, or if they did, it was pretty low budget. But yeah, I always thought the Blair Witch Project was very appealing as a film. It frightened me because I like I said, I've been camping a lot in my life, and like sitting outside like at night around a fire or something like that, you feel very like secluded because the darkness is surrounding you and you can't really see very far into the dark. And just putting yourself in that setting of like hearing like freaky noises out in the distance where you might not know what's happening. You know, generally when you go camping, at least modern camping, you know, you have campsites all around you, people all around you, you know, sites away, whatever. But thinking of being completely secluded in like a forest setting where there's nobody around, you don't know exactly where you are situated in society, like you know, how far away the nearest resident is or anything like that, if you needed help or if there was an emergency. And then on top of that, putting something like supernatural hunting you, it's just a spooky premise for me. You know, it kind of started the found footage, you know, trend of like shaky cam, I'm running around in the forest, you know, with a handheld camera kind of thing. But it was really original, and when I seen it, it scared me. It's always a movie I can come back to, and now the sequel is absolute dog shit. It's called The Book of Shadows, Blair Witch Project 2, or Blair Witch 2, I can't remember exactly, but it's really bad. It's a notoriously bad film. I think it came out a year after this one or something like that, but it's really bad. And then they remade it, but I guess it was a third movie called The Blair Witch. I want to say it came out in like 2016 maybe. It was okay. It's not as good as the original, but it was better than the second one. I recommend watching both, but it's not anything that's, you know, mind-bending. It continues the story of the first movie, but it's kind of a remake in the same way too. But yeah, Blair Witch Project. If you haven't checked it out, I recommend it. Number 3 is The Shining. And I know a lot of people probably have seen this, but since it's pretty old at this point, you know, it came out in 1980. There might be some younger people watching this or listening to this that haven't seen it, that don't, you know much about The Shining. It's obviously based off the Stephen King novel, but it departs quite a bit from the novel. Apparently Stephen King like absolutely detested the movie because of how far it departed from his book. It was directed by Stanley Kubrick. Yeah, I really enjoy this film. I think it's a really fun, well done film. It's well acted. There's some pretty scary, terrifying scenes. For people that don't know, it's basically a family that moves into a hotel that's pretty secluded over a winter. They're basically there as like caretakers of the hotel, and they get basically like cabin fever from the hotel in a way. There's more to it than that. I don't want to spoil the film entirely, but there's like a kind of haunting aspect to the hotel as well. And yeah, the main character basically starts kind of losing it a little bit, and you see like the paranoia and fear of seclusion kind of set in throughout the movie and to the family. It's really well shot. It's really a well done film for 1980. Yeah, really, just a really cool film. I really recommend it. There's a few documentaries about it, about like the different interpretations of certain scenes, which I think is pretty fascinating because it can be interpreted a few different ways. Like I said, though, it departs quite heavily from the book. So if you haven't read the book, I recommend the book more than anything. I mean, that goes without saying, most books are better than the movie that are based upon them. But it's a fun film. If you take it for what it is and don't compare it necessarily right to the book, I think it's a really well done film. I really enjoy it. Now there's a sequel to the film too. What is it called? Hold on. I gotta pull it up. I can't think. It's also a book written by Stephen King. Dr. Sleep. And it departs from The Shining quite a bit. It's a very different story, but it basically is like 20 years after, or 30 years after The Shining in storyline. But it's also a really, really solid book. I don't think the movie did it necessarily as good as Justice, but there's a movie based off of it as well. Not directed by Stanley Kubrick, obviously, but it came out 2019, I believe. But worth checking out if you're interested. So number 2 is a movie called Cabin in the Woods, and it came out in 2011, directed by Drew Goddard. And it's kind of a horror film, kind of a comedy film. I recommend not reading up on this film if you haven't watched it or haven't seen it. It's very standalone, and it's very like good to go in without expectations or plot lines necessarily in your head. I don't want to spoil like the actual twist of the film or in any way, but it's gonna come off as a very generic horror film. The first like 30 minutes of it, but I just stay with it because it kind of has a twist in there where it kind of turns things on its head. But really, really funny, really, really well done, really well written. Chris Hemsworth is in it after he took on Thor, which is funny, but the film got delayed, I think, like maybe 2 years, if I'm not mistaken. So by the time Chris Hemsworth has kind of like blown up as Thor, this movie eventually came out. But when he shot this film, apparently he was like pretty unknown. But anyway, it's a really, really funny, good, solid film. It definitely, you'll see why I like it when I say my number 1, just because I love this type of horror film. But it turns things on its head. It has a twist, and it's one of my favorite films of all time. Like, it would definitely be in my top 20-25 films overall. It's a movie that kind of blew my mind when I seen it, and if I remember correctly, the trailers didn't really do it justice when it came out. Like, it makes it seem pretty generic, but definitely don't read up on it if you don't know anything about it. Just go, I don't know if it's streaming anywhere, but it's worth, the $5 to rent or whatever. It's old now. You can probably buy it for, $10-20, whatever. But really, really fun, solid film. And finally, my number 1 film. If you watched our top 10 films, I think that we did, or it might have been top 20 films, I don't remember, but this was in there for me. It's my favorite horror film. The movie Scream by Wes Craven came out in 1996. And I think this is kind of not only my favorite film, but also I think it rejuvenated the horror film franchise after like kind of a really rough spell of like late 80s, early 90s. Not a whole lot of horror films were coming out. I think people got pretty sick of the slasher genre just because of how many Nightmare on Elm Street movies came out, Friday the 13th movies came out, Halloween movies came out. Like, it was just sequel, and each one progressively generally got worse, or it might have peaked a little bit and then went back down to really bad. If you look at like Friday the 13th, it's pretty hit and miss throughout the series. Scream kind of rejuvenated the slasher genre, and it brought in comedy to the series. Obviously the leads, Neve Campbell, Courtney Cox is in it, David Arquette's in it. Really, really funny at parts. It's well written, it's clever, but pretty graphic at parts too. It's scary at parts. It was one of the first R-rated films I ever seen. I was 11 when it came out, but I think I seen it probably a couple years after that. I was probably like 13 or 14 when I first seen it. Because Scream 2, I think, had just came out. And if I remember correctly, I was in grade 8. So probably 98 or 99. But yeah, I was hanging out with a friend in grade school. And yeah, he had rented Scream to watch. And his mom was like, hey, you should call home and make sure your mom's okay with you watching this or whatever, you know, being a responsible parent and all. And I knew my mom would not let me watch this film. Like, I was not allowed to watch R-rated films for sure. My mom was pretty strict with what I watched growing up. And I fake called, you know, this was before cell phones and everything for, you know, you young viewers or listeners. But I fake called my mom on the phone and pretended I was talking to her. Meanwhile, it was just like a dial tone. And I was just like, yeah, like, I just wanted to make sure it was okay if I watched this movie at my friend's house, blah, 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 blah. You know, pretending to talk on the phone, and then hung up. And my friend's mom was like, oh, she said okay, like, everything's cool. And I was like, yeah, no problem. She didn't mind at all, you know, whatever. And we watched Scream, and I was instantly hooked, because it was like, not only one of my first R-rated films, but it was also a movie I knew I wasn't allowed to watch, so it made that much more exciting for me. But yeah, Scream is awesome, and it's a shame that the sequels are generally not very well done. Scream 2 is okay. If you haven't watched Scream 2, it's an okay sequel. But Scream 3 is a huge letdown. It's really, really bad. And Scream 4 has some awesome moments. I think overall the movie's decent, but the ending is terrible. And now they're rebooting it next. I think it's February next year, maybe 2022. Scream 5 comes out, which they're just calling Scream, which makes me think it's going to be mostly a reboot. But they do have a lot of returning people. Like, I think everybody is coming back that can come back, without spoiling who's alive and who's not from the series. But yeah, I love Scream. I think it's just an awesome Halloween film. I watch it every year during October. Neve Campbell's amazing in it. You know, this is the time where Neve Campbell was like huge. She was also in what the hell is it called? The Craft. Love that movie too. Awesome movie. But yeah, Scream, probably my favorite overall horror film. Yeah, it brought back the masked, you know, slasher film, and, you know, from Friday the 13th and Halloween and everything like that. It kind of brought that back in a way that was original and cool and scary at the same time. It made you fear horror films again. It wasn't like a cheesy, you know, we just need a ton of nudity or whatever to make this film exciting. There's nudity in it, but overall it plays with the genre in a way that's really smart and really clever. And yeah, it's my favorite. I like I said, I watch it every year. I've seen this movie literally 50 times. So if you have not watched Scream, that's mandatory viewing by Moose Milk standards. And that's it. Those are my top 10 with a couple honorable mentions. So, excuse me. Hopefully that gives you a few movies to check out that maybe you haven't seen during October. You know, we're 3 weeks away from Halloween, so, you know, there's 12 movies that you can put in those 3 weeks, and then, you know, check out a few of your own favorites. You know, if you want, put them in the comments after this post, and, you know, tell me your favorite, and I'll check that out. I've probably seen it, but maybe I haven't. You never know. I watch a lot of horror films, so good chance I've seen it, but if not, throw it in there. And hopefully you find something out of this that you'll enjoy that's, you know, maybe not on your top list, but something different. Like I said, going to be a shorter episode. It's only going to be like 40 minutes long, but I wanted to put out an episode every week. I try not to miss a week. And even though it's kind of weird doing a solo, it's interesting. It's a different take on it, you know? So I hope you enjoyed it. And if you haven't, follow at Moose Milk Media on Instagram. It's where we post live every week. We do these live every week on Friday nights. And then they go up on YouTube and Spotify and Apple Podcasts right after the episode's done. I post them. So give me, 3-4 hours and they'll be up on Spotify and everything else. So follow, comment, all that good stuff. Follow Matt too, at Customs by Matthew. He's not here this week, but he'll be back in a couple weeks. And he always appreciates new followers and everything like that. See all his, custom goodness that he does. He just posted a great, fantastic Mark Hoppus action figure that he made. Really, really well done. Really, really cool to check out. So I highly recommend, if you haven't dropped by his page, go check it out. Mark Hoppus actually responded to him, which is super cool. As, me and him have both been lifelong fans of Blink. So really cool to see him get that kind of, thumbs up from Mark Hoppus. So really, really cool. But follow him, and then our album art is done by @JeannieMilnArt. She did a great job on our album art, so go give her a follow as well and show her some appreciation and love. And that's gonna do it for this week. Like I said, a little shorter episode, but 45 minutes alone, it's good enough. So I hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you next week for another solo episode. I think I'm going to maybe do my top 10 video games. I haven't really decided yet, but I think that's where I'm leaning towards. So if you enjoy video games and you want to drop by, check that out next week, next Friday, live here. So enjoy your Thanksgiving for all you Canadians out there. Happy Thanksgiving. And if you're not, Canadian, have a good weekend. Enjoy it. And we'll see you next week. Thanks for tuning in. See ya.